Hello, everybody. Hope that you're well. Certainly miss seeing you guys every day. Miss ending my day with the ninth period world history, talking about some world cultures. I am thankful for the chance to do some work together. I think it's good for us to keep pressing forward and have something to do with our time and push through obstacles and learning curves together. I think that's good for us. So I'm excited to start a new unit with you. We're going to be heading back to Asia here, and we're going to be talking about early Japan and Korea, as you can see. And what we're going to do is basically what we've been doing. I hope that we can package our approach fairly effectively and use this online program to the best of our ability and kind of maintain small snippets of lecture and use PowerPoint to help support your understanding and maybe leverage the textbook from time to time. And I hope that this will be effective for us. If at any time you need help and want to contact me, please don't hesitate to do that. My plan is to kind of utilize 12:30 to 2:30 as office hours. So I'll be ready to answer any questions and any avenue that you ask them for those 2 hours each day. And other than that, I'll of course be around and still able to help possibly, but I'll be working on the next day's presentation and everything. But I do hope there won't be too many bumps in the road, but please let me know if there is. But in the meantime, let's get started. Let's talk about Japan first of all, and then later we'll get into Korea. Of course, there will be some similarities and some differences between the two. But one of the things that they do share is that they have a little bit of an isolated geography, and that's going to be impactful to both of them. So let's jump in and talk about Japan and this group of people that are going to develop a lifestyle and a culture and a civilization on the islands that we call Japan. The earliest of them to really kind of get started in building civilization and culture that we would recognize as Japanese actually got themselves started in what we call the Yamamoto Plain. That's near where Osaka and Kyoto are. Probably you've heard of Osaka at least. It's where the Olympics will be when it's time to hold the next Summer Olympics. They'll have it in Osaka, Japan, and it's one of their major cities, as is Kyoto. And there's this plain in sort of a saddle between a pretty mountainous region. Japan is a mountainous country. And so in this plain is where the first sort of recognizably Japanese culture and civilization gets started. And initially, they had a small aristocratic class of people that were kind of in charge and had authority over a fairly large population of farmers and artisans and servants and soldiers and so on. This small aristocratic class basically were in charge of what we might identify as clans. We might think of them kind of like family groups, but each clan would have a leader, and this local ruler would protect them from, other clans, anybody who might attack, and in return, the people would give them a portion of their annual harvest as taxes. This is not altogether dissimilar from places around the globe like Scotland or Germany or other places that a kind of feudalism actually developed. Now, eventually in Japan, one of the largest clans came to dominate. This clan was called the Yamamoto clan. That's why the plain itself is called the Yamamoto Plain today. And they become preeminent, and they kind of rise to the top. And it's through them that we're going to see this culture really take shape. But another thing that we need to look at to understand how things take shape is the geography itself. Now, Japan is what we call an archipelago. An archipelago is a chain of many islands. Now, there are 4 main islands of Japan, but if you're looking closely at the map, you can tell there's actually lots and lots of tiny little islands that dot the coastline there. Now, if you added all the 4 major islands together of this Japanese archipelago, what we would find is that they add up to about the size of Montana, 146,000 square miles. Maybe that's bigger than you expected. I'm not sure what your expectation was in that regard, but it is not, of course, expansive, but it's not tiny either. One of the things that maybe restricts it a little bit is the fact that there's only about 11% of the land that can be farmed, and that's partly due to how mountainous this is. Now, the land that's able to be farmed, this 11%, is really good soil. It's a volcanic set of islands, and so this volcanic soil is very, very fertile, and that's helpful. Now, it also means that Japan is prone to earthquakes, and it actually belongs to a geographic feature of the Pacific Rim that sometimes is called the Ring of Fire because of volcanic activity and because of even earthquake activity. And so Japan has suffered through that in its history. Its cities have had to rebuild from time to time because of earthquakes hitting them. Maybe the most famous is one that hit Tokyo in 1923, really kind of leveled Tokyo in a heartbreaking manner. But besides being volcanic, the islands themselves have really contributed to the cultural feel of Japan. Japanese culture is viewed, or it views itself as being distinct really from the rest of Asia. It has a sense of having a separate destiny from the rest of Asia because it's separate. In a lot of ways, that's good, and in a lot of ways, that's been healthy and beautiful in Japanese history. And you can imagine the pride that Japanese people feel to belong to a culture like their own. But it is also true to say that this feeling of a separate destiny was twisted negatively in the World War II era as Japanese leaders leveraged that feeling of separateness and turned it into a feeling of superiority. And Japanese people began to believe that they were destined to lead the Asian world in a sort of new Asian order, and that's what they set out to do. And it's not actually all that dissimilar to what Hitler was thinking about doing in Europe. But that's the twisting of this Japanese feeling of separateness. Is not the norm. Now, Japan being separate, of course, is obvious and important, but it doesn't mean that they had no interaction with the mainland. In fact, one of the earliest leaders of the Yamamoto clan, a man named Shotoku Taishi, actually will leverage China in his goal of organizing Japan. What he's going to do in the end is actually send some emissaries, some ambassadors to China to see how they organize their government, because as he was seeking to bring clans together and organize everybody, he wanted to have some insight on how to do that. So what he ends up doing is enhancing the power of the central ruler. Instead of there being many different clan leaders, there tends to, in this era, be one central ruler that rises to the top. And that means, of course, the limit of the power of the aristocrats. Just like when we studied China way back at the beginning of the semester, there will be plenty of leaders in Japanese history who don't want the aristocrats to have too much power. They sort of feared that. So what ends up happening is Prince Shotoku is going to he's going to kind of begin to leverage this concept, this familiar concept that the leader has a divine heritage, is divine in some way. And so this, of course, commands the people's loyalty in a way that wasn't true before. And that's going to be something that Shotoku Taishi's successors are going to actually utilize as well. They're going to continue to make political reforms based on this Chinese model, and they're going to create administrative districts, and they're going to put senior officials in charge of each district. And what's going to end up happening is a system that we might identify as feudal. Now, we haven't talked much about feudalism, but you might remember this sense of there being one central ruler, and then beneath them a layer of aristocrats who have access to the land, and then even maybe a third layer of aristocrats, and on down to the peasants and the servants who have very little freedom because they have very little access to the lands. And land, of course, is a premium in Japan. So what's going to happen then is people are going to work the lands, but have to pay taxes directly to the central government in order to have the access to the land that they need. Because all farmland technically will belong to the government. So as we start to delve into Japanese history, we're going to see the flourishing of a beautiful Japanese culture that's going to include fascinating things like the samurai culture and so forth and so on. But one of the things we'll note is that as different as Japan is, there is much that's shared in common with the rest of the world as well, including this feudal system. Now, I want you to remember that on the sheet that I published online, that you found this link on there, at the bottom is a small response exercise just to make sure you're continuing to pull understanding forward with us from day to day. And I want you to make sure you scroll down on that sheet, see the bottom, there's directions there on what I want you to do. Just kind of listing a couple of things that you already knew about Japan that you heard today, and a few things that you learned today. And we want to make sure that we're interacting with the information as much as we can. So let me know if you need any help. I'm glad to interact with you and help you in any way that I can. And look forward to doing this more with you in the coming days. Thanks.